Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Happy Monday, everybody. Today we're going to take a look at all of the major astrological events of this week from January 6th through the 12th. That's Monday through Sunday. I will preview for you what is to come and tell you also a little bit about the specific content that I'll be rolling out this week. Most of you know that we just completed our Kickstarter campaign. I record things about a week in advance, and so right now I am smack dab in the middle of the completion of the Kickstarter and the fulfillment of rewards for over 2,000 people. So usually this first week is a little, the content is not our typical production schedule. So this week I am rewinding a few episodes that are very relevant and should be very poignant episodes for the astrology of the week. But I am letting you know that normal content and production schedule will resume next week. So next week when you tune in, you'll see regular, new, fresh content 5 days a week, and you won't see me plugging holes with rewind episodes. I have to do this at this point of the year because we are a little bit overwhelmed in terms of the amount of work that happens just this particular week of the year with reward fulfillment. So hang with me, be patient, and thank you so much for your patience with us as we do our best to get out all of your rewards and set everybody up who supported us. We really do appreciate that. So anyway, on that note, there are a bunch of transits this week that we're going to be looking at, and I'll tell you exactly what kind of videos you can anticipate, what rewind videos we'll be doing and stuff like that too. We are looking at the 6th through the 12th. Let me outline for you the transits that we'll be looking at this week on the channel. Starting today, Mars's retrograde takes it back into the sign of Cancer. This is a big deal because the majority of the rest of the Mars retrograde between now and late February will be taking place in the sign of Mars's fall in Cancer. We're going to be looking at that this week. And we're going to be looking at some rewind episodes exploring Mars in Cancer. And also, we're going to be looking at, by the 12th, the end of the week, I'm going to jump forward here, Mars's retrograde in Cancer will take it backward into a trine with Neptune. This trine is something we explored earlier in the fall in its direct motion. So I'm going to replay that episode, and we're going to look at it now from the context of it being back in that dynamic through retrogradation. That video should hold up really well in terms of exploring the archetypal combination of Mars and Neptune. Then, as the early part of the week, going back here, today on the 6th, Mercury also squares Neptune. Talk about that a little bit today. And then we will also be looking at this through the lens of the archetypal combination of Mercury and Neptune. Mercury will enter Capricorn this week and finally leave the sign of its detriment in Sagittarius. That shift of Mercury into Capricorn we'll look at through a rewind episode exploring the archetypal combination of Mercury into Capricorn. It's a little bit of a quiet week astrologically. There are only two major aspects this week, Mercury square Neptune and Mars trine Neptune. It's kind of a Neptunian week. And so we're going to spend most of our time re-examining Mars into Cancer, its placement there, and through some rewind episodes in that respect. And then we'll look at Mercury into Capricorn and Mars trine Neptune as well. So anyway, now let us take a look at each of these and just preview a little bit about each of them here to start the week. Here is our real-time clock, and we're going to start here on January 6th. And just noting that at the start of the day, we've got Mars retrograding back into the sign of Cancer. Now let's take a look at how long this is going to last. If we take this forward, Mars goes through the last decan of Cancer, the last 10 degrees between now and the end of January. It enters the second decan of Capricorn Cancer, the middle 10 degrees around the beginning of February. And then it's going to station by late February. This is around the 24th. It's stationing in Cancer, where it then turns direct. That direct motion will then carry it back through the final two decans of Cancer, the middle decan and the last decan. And it will finally leave Cancer. And let's go down to the actual day. So you can see it changing around April 17th into the 18th. And so it's going to be a little sensitive depending on where you're at in the world. But the 17th and 18th of April, we see Mars finally leaving Cancer, the sign of its fall. So between today and April 18th, let's say, we have Mars in one of its more difficult sign positions. So we have to understand what the archetypal tension is about there, that it went into the creation of the dignity category in the first place. I recently saw a letter from a prominent modern astrologer trying to do away with malefic, benefic distinctions, dignity categories. And there's just a real ignorance, unfortunately, around the ancient philosophical rationale behind the entire existence of dignity categories that leads people to think that they know better. But these dignity categories are actually extremely important for understanding the underlying archetypal philosophy of our language. It doesn't mean that nothing good can come of Mars in Cancer, but it also does mean that there are inherent kinds of tensions with Mars in the sign of Cancer that we have to pay attention to. Did I say Mercury? Mars in Cancer. Okay, so let's go back to our moment right now, and we will take this forward to, here we go. I'm gonna get Mars into Cancer here, so we're up to speed. All right, so here we are, January 6th, Mars in the sign of Cancer. Why is Mars in Cancer in the sign of its fall? This has to do with the fact that Mars is exalted in the sign of Capricorn, where Jupiter is in its fall, and Jupiter is exalted in the sign of Cancer, where Mars is in its fall. The contrary archetypal qualities of Mars and Jupiter are therefore at work in these dignity categories. While Jupiter refers to the proliferation of life and the descent of spirit into matter that was depicted through the sign of Cancer in the annual descent of the sun toward the earth. That was a literal picture astronomically, a kind of symbolic picture, I should say, of the descent of spirit into matter in the world of embodiment and the myriad number of forms that come into being and pass out of being that is the manifest universe. Cancer was called the gateway of mankind. You've heard me say that before many times. So for this reason, Jupiter, a planet associated with the proliferation of life and fertility itself, was exalted in this sign. Now in Capricorn, Jupiter is in its fall, and that's because we are at the point of time of the solar year in which the light is the dimmest. It is the darkest day of the year. And from that point forward, the ascent of spirit out of matter, the path of transcendence, the slow climb up the mountain that the sun takes, which metaphorically represents the ascent from matter towards spirit, that rising out of matter that begins in matter, but has to work in it and through it in order to transcend it, takes place. And that darkest, dimmest point of the year, the perseverance and the pushing upward and out of matter, out of the world of forms, was associated with the exaltation of Mars. And so a place associated with death and darkness and an impulse to transcend entanglement with materiality is associated with Mars, while the desire for spirit to enter matter and proliferate and make abundant and alive and lush the material world is associated with Jupiter. These two planets, therefore, have something that makes them a kind of contrary. Mars seeks to transcend, in a sense, whereas Jupiter seeks immanence. There's a way in which Jupiter is like the cornucopia, or the horn of plenty, the abundance of life in the material cosmos. Mars is about those circumstances that, what would you die for? What do you live for that goes beyond this world? Remember, Mars is also in its domicile in Aries, where the sun is exalted. Both planets tend to have an interest in things that go beyond life. And the gateway of the gods, was what Capricorn was called, was interested in transcendence, life beyond the mortal world. And so Mars, the sign of transcendence, a planet associated with the impulse toward transcendence, toward climbing a great mountain and disentangling ourselves from the material world, finds itself at odds with the sign of Cancer, because the sign is naturally about the entanglement with the world that we need, love, value, cherish, And so one of the major reasons that Mars is considered fallen in Cancer is because it has to deal with the frustrations of worldly, emotional, bodily entanglement. And where it seeks to cut the cord and transcend, we have a sign that demands engagement, enmeshment, attachment, bondedness, and involvement in the world. The combination can therefore present us with things like the desire to protect, defend, advocate for things that are material, like the body, like mothers, like family, a kind of guardianship energy. A guard dog is a good Mercury or Mars in Cancer kind of symbol. Not surprisingly, during Mars in Cancer, we know someone who dealt with a break-in and then had this whole conversation about getting a guardian dog. And we were talking to them because Hilda is, you can't see her here, but she's laying on the floor behind me. She's a guard dog. That's her instinct is to be a guardian breed. So we were talking about this, and I just couldn't help but notice the entire conversation was very Mars in Cancer. Mars in Cancer, however, can also bring up all of the things that make that are vulnerable, conflicts within the family, trying to rise above or transcend things that are very mortal or physical limitations in the body, and the difficulties that we have in addressing them when we wish we could rise above them. All sorts of tensions that are held in the exploration of Mars through the sign of Cancer, many of which are beautiful things. You know, the mama bear energy of Mars in Cancer has been well noted, and so has the kind of impulse to protect, defend, advocate for things that are vulnerable. Those are great qualities of Mars in Cancer. And many natives with that placement will have those qualities on display in their life somehow. Concern for those who are suffering, protection and advocacy for those who are vulnerable, a guardianship quality. But also the vulnerability and the hostility that can enter into fragile or sensitive places, and some of the complications of things like emotions, anger, violence, and safety. Okay, well, we will be exploring that more as the week goes on. At the beginning of the week, we also have Mercury squaring Neptune. And this is a very quick transit. You might be noticing it today. Mercury square Neptune can give us mental or intellectual preoccupation with otherworldliness and with things that are mystical, philosophical, imaginative. It can also tilt the mind toward grandiosity and exaggeration or inflation, or the tendency to preach or be dogmatic or somewhat fanatical on the level of mind, thought, communication, belief, ideas. It is also the mind attuned to other worlds and something of the imaginative, romantic, and artistic qualities of mind that, for example, you'll see at work in the lives of singers and songwriters or mystic poets. And so an interesting little Mercury transit to Neptune to start the week. Be careful of the tendency to get caught up in illusions or fantasies, but also, sometimes illusion, not illusions, but sometimes the romantic, imaginative impulse is exactly what we need to free us from the traps of literalism and being overly concrete or too practical. Sometimes the Mercury Neptune comes along at just the right time to save us from the worst, most practical parts of ourselves. Of course, this is interesting because on January 8th, just 2 days later, let's fast forward this, you'll see that Mercury will enter the sign of Capricorn. And as Mercury enters the sign of Capricorn, we're going to be pausing to reflect on the meaning of Mercury in Capricorn. This is a morning star Mercury in Capricorn, and a shift in dignity that is worth mentioning since we've had Mercury in Sagittarius for quite some time now. If you back this up, watch how long it's been that Mercury has been in Sagittarius. We're going to go back to through its retrograde and then through its direct motion. This takes us all the way back to Mercury entering the sign of Capricorn or Sagittarius about November 3rd. November 2nd into the 3rd, right? All the way up until January 8th. So that is quite some time that we have had Mercury in the sign of Sagittarius. And for that reason, this week we're going to take some time to explore Mercury in Capricorn, because it's a nice moment whenever you've had a planet in a sign for a really long time. One of the things that I've observed as an astrologer is that it's remarkable how distinctly the dignity and sign change will stand out. Because you've been in Mercury and Sag territory for a long time, all of a sudden you go into a new space. It's a great time to pick up on the nature of the sign and the archetypal combination of the planet in a new sign. So we're going to take a look at Mercury in Capricorn this week as a rewind episode. For that reason, it's a really nice moment to kind of distinctly notice Mercury changing signs. So that happens on the 8th, Mercury in Capricorn. We'll say more about that. But one thing that's interesting is that Mercury will now be configured to its host Saturn in a sextile in the mystical domain of Pisces. And so we have this kind of Capricorn Pisces vibe going on. We'll probably explore the sextile between those when they form in a little bit of time. That'll be next week. And then on the 12th, at the end of the week, I already mentioned this, but Mars will trine Neptune. So we visited this earlier through Mars's direct motion. If I take this back in time, you'll see that Mars trined Neptune just before Halloween, late October. This is October 27th into the 28th. Actually, if you could slow it down a little bit. It's like the 27th through the 30th. So just before Halloween, right into the time of Halloween, that Mars-Neptune square was active. We are going to be revisiting that through a rewind episode where I will replay for you what we said about that trine during late October when it happened. And then you can revisit it and see how that retrograde is triggering a revisitation of the themes of late October. But we'll lay out for you all the archetypal dimensions in that video too. And I'll give you a special intro with a few ideas for what to think about given that the retrogradation is part of it. That'll be a rewind episode. So anyway, that takes us through the week. This is what we're looking at for this week to come. Again, please bear with us as we are just fulfilling rewards. Make sure you check your spam folder if you haven't heard from us, because we've sent out emails to absolutely every soul that donated through the Kickstarter with instructions for how to receive your reward. If you haven't gotten it, spam, right? So and by the way, if you're struggling to receive it, you can email us info@nightlightastrology.com. Some rewind episodes this week as we catch up and turn the page, and the normal production schedule returns next week. And I promise you won't have to deal with rewind episodes for a while. Okay. On that note, again, big thank you to everybody for supporting the channel this year. We really appreciate it. The only other thing I can mention coming up is if you go to and I'll plug this more as the week goes on, but next week we have our first monthly webinar of the year on the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries. So you can check that out under the live or under the events page, the webinar series. You can register for that. I'll tell you more about it later in the week. All right. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.